Hi, I'm Jenny Ray, the Managing Director of Management Consulted, and I'm here today to talk about how consulting firms conduct the resume review in a team. The team resume review is an incredibly important part of the recruiting process because consultants themselves get involved. It's not just HR and it's not a computer review. And many of the consulting firms fill the majority of their positions after conducting team reviews. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process as I'm familiar with it, both from the work that I do at Management Consulted as well as my experience in resume reviews. A couple of key things that are important to know. First, there are two parts of the review. The first is the pre-review, so this happens before you actually get into the room with the entire team. And then the second is the group meeting or the team review. So I'm going to talk about both of those. In the pre-review, we would receive all of the information that was submitted from an applicant. So we would receive a resume, a cover letter, as well as any additional information like leadership essays or other information from their application. We would receive all of that and it would be compiled into a booklet that was bound that we could read, usually over a weekend, or in very nice circumstances, we would have up to a week to review these. There would be about 500 resumes that would be considered in a standard review. So that's the number that I'm going to use as my barometer today. In the pre-review process, I would need to go through every single one of the resumes and give them a numerical score. Usually the score would be on a 1 to 4 or 1 to 5 point scale. And that score would indicate your desire to see that person interviewed. So for example, a 4 would be high desire, a 0 would be no desire. And so we would go through the process of ranking each one of them. And some people we knew in advance what they were going to be looking for. Some people we had our eyes out for as a part of the networking process. And other people we were just meeting cold through their resumes. So we would have to go through that process. It would take many hours to go through the ranking process. But that pre-work was really essential to what then we would do in the team. When we arrived together in the actual team environment, then there would be an HR coordinator who would usually manage the entire process. The team review meetings usually happened on a Friday afternoon when most people were in the office, and we would order lunch in. And we would plan to be there for as long as it took. Sometimes the resume review process would take up to 4 or even 8 hours. So an extensive period of time. The focus was on really breaking down the process into 3 key areas. The first were the must interviews. And these were covered in the first 5 to 10 minutes. A list of the people that were guaranteed an interview were put up on the screen, and any discussion was around a reason why we shouldn't interview them. Usually there wasn't a reason. The way to get onto that list were if people were very, very high ranking in the pre-resume review process, if they were referred by somebody very senior in the firm, like a partner. So for example, if somebody had a personal relationship, their families knew each other, or the client relationship that the partner really valued, then oftentimes they would refer somebody for an interview. Or it would be somebody who had previously interviewed and done well. They had maybe, for example, gotten into the final round, but had not received an offer, and the firm wanted to give them some more time to practice their interviewing skills before they came back. The second part of the process was getting rid of about 50% of the lower ranking scores. These were generally people who did not perform well in the pre-resume review across the boards. They had consistently low scores, or people who had really been cataloged throughout the networking process as somebody who did not perform well in a one-on-one environment. So someone who was really pushy, or somebody who just people did not enjoy talking about, maybe an overshare, or somebody who was incredibly long-winded or not able to articulate themselves very well. That was considered kind of their shot at the interview, and so they would be excluded from the process. So generally we would spend about 20 minutes reviewing the names of about 50%, so in this case 250 people, for rejection from the pile. So we weren't going to discuss them anymore. We didn't go through each one of them and discuss them. We just said, is there anyone from this pile that you wanted to rescue? If somebody was rescued, they were placed into the third and final pile. And this was the middle pile on the slide, the discuss pile. So for example, we would have out of the 500 original people, about 230 of them would be discussed. And in the discussion process, we would go through all of their application materials. So we would start with the resume. If a decision couldn't be made based on the resume, we would go into the cover letter and some of the additional supporting materials. Generally, people who are successful at receiving from that 230, the final 40 slots were people who generally ranked pretty well across the board, but maybe were just inconsistent on one or two things, and those that had very, very strong networking approaches or networking skills. Usually somebody would advocate for them in the process. So over the course of the remaining part of the afternoon, that could take 1 hour, it could take 4 to 7 hours to complete the total process. So like I said, just to recap, there was a pre-resume review process and a team review that we would go through in order to fill the interview slots at Bain. And the core focus was generally on filling the first 20 slots in the first 5 to 10 minutes, removing the bottom 50% of the applicants very quickly, and then spending the remainder of the time to discuss the process. It's critical that you understand that your resume has to do the job for you when you're in the room. And if you don't know what that looks like, we would love to help. We offer resume review services as well as resume edit services, where we actually go line by line and word by word through your resume. So if you have questions about this or any of our other services, please feel free to contact us at our website, managementconsulted.com.